The flight attendant stood firm, blocking the man's way. "Sir, please move to the economy section. First class is reserved for premium passengers." The man looked up, his expression calm and unreadable. She had no idea who she was talking to by the time she realized her mistake. It was too late. Before we begin, please leave a comment below the video about where you are watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any videos. The plane door remained open as passengers slowly moved to their seats. Among them, Alex Carter settled into his first-class seat, placing his bag neatly under the seat in front of him. He adjusted his seatbelt, feeling the softness of the leather against his back. This was something special he had never allowed himself to experience before. His life had always revolved around his dedication to students, the school, and the community. But this time he allowed himself to rest a vacation long overdue. As he gazed out the window, watching the bustling airport, he was unaware that his peaceful moment was about to be interrupted. A shadow appeared above him. "Sir, I need to check your ticket," the flight attendant said. Alex Carter turned to see the flight attendant Rachel Bennett standing beside him, tall and composed. Her sharp gaze missing nothing, yet there was something in her expression that made him suspicious. "Is your ticket for first class?" she asked, her tone full of doubt. "Yes," Alex replied calmly. Rachel stared at him for a long moment before closing her lips. "Are you sure?" she asked again. She didn't bother to thoroughly check his ticket, merely skimming over it before asking the question. This scene caused a few passengers to lift their heads, noticing the shift in the atmosphere. Some looked away, pretending not to hear, while others listened, curiously paying attention. Alex sighed gently. "There's no mistake, I purchased this ticket myself." Rachel sighed lightly. "All right, I just need to double-check it in our system. Please step aside while I handle this." Alex held her gaze for a moment before nodding. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, his demeanor calm but firm. Other first-class passengers avoided his gaze, pretending not to notice. Rachel gestured for Alex to follow her toward the galley. She pressed some numbers into the phone on board and spoke quietly, but Alex could still hear the irritation in her voice. After a while, she turned back to him, offering a strained, unnatural smile. "There seems to be an issue with your ticket," she said. "We can arrange a seat for you in economy while we resolve this." Alex clenched his jaw, but his voice remained steady. "There's no issue. My ticket is perfectly valid." Her smile faded. "Sir, I don't want to repeat myself. Please gather your belongings and move to the economy section." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted. Passengers in the economy section began to take notice of the situation. Heads turned to watch, and a quiet murmur spread throughout the plane. Alex stared at Rachel for a long time. He realized she had decided he didn't belong there, regardless of what he said, whether his ticket was valid or not. She had made up her mind. Without saying a word, Alex returned to his seat and grabbed his carry-on. He pulled it down from the overhead compartment, slung it over his shoulder, and started walking down the aisle toward economy. He could feel the eyes of the others on him. Some eyes were full of curiosity. Others looked at him with silent judgment, but no one spoke up. No one said anything. Alex lowered himself into an empty seat in economy and sighed. The space was cramped, the seat harder, but it wasn't the downgrade that bothered him. What frustrated him was the embarrassment. His fingers hovered over his phone before he finally typed a message. "Bump to economy. The flight attendant didn't check my ticket properly." He hit send. A few seconds later, his phone vibrated. "What do you mean? Bumped down?" Alex glanced ahead where Rachel was still continuing her duties, oblivious to the mistake she had just made. A new message appeared. "Send me the flight number." Alex typed in the flight number and sent it back. A pause, then the final message arrived. "Stay put. This isn't over." Alex sat in the economy seat, his hand lightly resting on his phone screen, his eyes looking out the small window. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, but his mind was elsewhere. He had spent his entire life teaching about respect, fairness, and patience, yet now he was being dismissed without a word, without a question, as if he were invisible. The first-class passengers, those who had witnessed him being escorted away, went back to chatting, drinking, and enjoying their comfort. No one spoke up. No one asked if he needed help. His phone buzzed again. "Who's the flight attendant?" Alex sighed, rubbed his temple, and replied, "I didn't catch her first name, just saw her name tag. Bennett." The reply came instantly, "Noted." Alex exhaled. He didn't know what was happening on the other side of the conversation, but he trusted it. In the economy section, Alex Carter sensed something was wrong. His phone vibrated again, a new message. "What's your gate number?" Alex raised an eyebrow, looking at the boarding pass he had placed in the seat pocket. He sent the gate number A, long pause. Then the final message arrived. "Got it. Stay in your seat." Alex leaned back in his chair, watching the flight attendants move around the cabin, serving drinks and adjusting trays as if nothing had happened. But there was a feeling inside him. He knew this wasn't over. Meanwhile, Rachel Bennett moved through the first-class section, adjusting trays and serving drinks, completely unconcerned with what had just occurred. She had seen many passengers try to sit in first class over the years, and to her it was nothing out of the ordinary. The man had sat down without protesting, which only confirmed what she had thought. He didn't belong here, but what she didn't realize was that her decision had set off a chain of events she was unprepared for. In the cockpit, Captain James Foster received an urgent message from the flight information system. As soon as he read the name of the passenger mentioned in the request, his eyes became tense. He turned to his colleague, his voice low and serious. "Get the passenger list." The co-pilot grimaced but complied, tapping a few buttons on the screen and bringing up the list. The names quickly scrolled down until it stopped at one name, Alex Carter. Captain Foster read the information twice, his heartbeat quickening. He knew that name. Everyone in the aviation industry knew it. "It's not a downgrade. It's the embarrassment," Alex thought as his fingers swiped across his phone. Finally, he sent a message. "Bump to economy flight attendant. Didn't check my ticket properly." He hit send, and just a few seconds later, his phone vibrated. "What do you mean bump down?" Alex glanced toward the front of the plane where Rachel Bennett was still working, unaware of the mistake she had made. A new message appeared. "Send me the flight number." Alex entered the flight number and sent it back. After a moment of silence, the final message came. "Stay put. This isn't over." Alex sat in the cramped seat, his fingers resting on his phone screen, his eyes looking out the small window. The soft hum of the engines filled the cabin, but his mind was elsewhere. He had spent his entire life teaching about respect, fairness, and patience. Yet now he was being cast aside, without a word, without any doubt, as if he were invisible. The first-class passengers, those who had witnessed him being escorted away, went back to chatting, drinking, and enjoying their comfort. No one spoke up. No one asked if he needed help. His phone buzzed again. "Who's the flight attendant?" Alex sighed, rubbed his temple, and replied, "Didn't catch her first name, just saw the name tag, Bennett." The response came almost instantly. "Noted." Alex exhaled. He didn't know what was happening on the other side of the conversation, but he trusted it. Meanwhile, Rachel Bennett was quickly making a cup of coffee, ignoring the stares from the other flight attendants. One of them, a young woman named Lily Parker, hesitated before speaking up. "Is there an issue with that man's ticket?" Rachel Bennett glared. "He's sitting in first class." Lily frowned. "But you saw him, didn't you?" Rachel Bennett cut her off, took a sip of her coffee, and spoke with complete certainty. "He doesn't look like a first-class passenger. There might be a glitch in the system, or someone gave him a ticket. Either way, I'm not letting him sit there when it's clear he doesn't belong there." Lily's stomach tightened. She wanted to object, but didn't dare. Rachel Bennett had worked for the airline for many years and had a reputation for being strict, the type of person who never admits to being wrong. Lily looked over at first class where the empty seat Alex Carter had occupied still remained. Something wasn't right. Back in the economy section, Alex's phone vibrated again. A new message. "What's your gate number?" Alex raised an eyebrow, checked his boarding pass, and sent the gate number a long pause. Then the final message arrived. "Got it. Stay in your seat." Alex leaned back in his chair again, continuing to watch the flight attendants move through the cabin serving drinks and adjusting trays as if nothing was happening. But he knew this wasn't over yet. Captain James Foster held the phone in the cockpit and dialed the head flight attendant's line. A few seconds later, Rachel Bennett's voice came through the speaker, gentle and indifferent. "This is Rachel Bennett." Captain Foster's voice was steady, but there was a weight in his words. "Ms. Bennett, I need to confirm something. You asked a first-class passenger named Alex Carter to move to the economy section, didn't you?" There was a moment of silence. Then Rachel Bennett's confident voice came through again. "Yes, Captain. His ticket didn't meet first-class standards, so I had him moved to economy." Captain Foster gripped the phone tighter, his voice becoming tense. "Did you verify his ticket?" Rachel Bennett laughed lightly, as if she thought she was being questioned, unreasonably. "Captain, I've been in this job for over 10 years. I know when someone doesn't belong in first class." A long pause followed. Captain Foster spoke again, but his tone was much colder and sharper. "Ms. Bennett, do you know who Alex Carter is?" Silence enveloped the other end of the line. Captain Foster didn't wait for her to respond, but continued. "Alex Carter is the owner of this airline." The line on the other side went completely silent. Rachel Bennett's face turned pale. For the first time during the flight, she felt something she had never experienced before, a deep realization that she had made a serious mistake, a mistake that could not be undone. She stood frozen, her hand still gripping the phone, her heart racing. For the first time in her career, she felt real fear. An oppressive silence stretched between her and Captain Foster, heavy and suffocating. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "There must be some confusion." Captain Foster's firm response came. "There's no confusion. Ms. Bennett, Alex Carter, is the passenger confirmed in first class. You had him moved to economy without verifying his ticket, and now we've received instructions from the operations office." Rachel Bennett's face drained of color. "Instructions," she gasped, her heart sinking. Captain Foster continued, his voice even colder. "You are to take Alex Carter back to first class and publicly apologize when we land. You will report to the board of directors immediately upon landing for a formal review of this matter." She took a deep breath, but her throat tightened. A formal review? This wasn't just a minor complaint. It was much bigger than she thought. She struggled to keep her voice calm. "Captain, I was just following protocol." Captain Foster didn't respond immediately, letting the silence linger. Then he answered with a cold, decisive finality. "No, Ms. Bennett, you didn't follow protocol. You were wrong." The phone line went silent. Rachel Bennett felt her legs grow heavy as she made her way toward the economy section. Each step made the truth sink in deeper. She had publicly humiliated the owner of this airline right in front of all the passengers. She had dismissed him, looked down on him, and forced him to leave his validly paid seat. Now she had to face him. The economy section became quieter. Some passengers had noticed that something was happening. Their eyes shifted from Rachel Bennett to Alex Carter, who sat silently in his seat, calm and expressionless. He didn't react, didn't protest, and that made everything worse. Rachel Bennett stopped next to Alex Carter's seat, clearing her throat awkwardly, trying to force a professional smile. "Mr. Carter, I apologize. There's been a misunderstanding. I'd like to move you back to first class." Alex slowly looked up, his calm gaze meeting hers. Misunderstanding. He repeated, his voice unchanged. Rachel Bennett stood there, her hands clenched. She hadn't felt this in years, the uncertainty, the failure to control everything as she always did. She quickly responded, "Yes, I'm sorry for this mistake. Please allow me to take you back to your original seat." A few passengers nearby stopped pretending not to hear. They had seen everything before, but now they were witnessing something new. A flight attendant who had always been confident now. Having to back down, Alex didn't move. He simply tilted his head slightly and asked, "Why are you taking me back now? You were sure I didn't belong there before?" Rachel Bennett felt her throat dry up. She couldn't offer a reason because there was no valid reason to justify it. She hadn't checked his ticket, and she hadn't asked any other first-class passengers to show their tickets. She had only done this with Alex Carter. The room became silent, so quiet you could hear the passengers breathing. Every eye was on Rachel Bennett, looking at her as if waiting for her to face the truth. She had been through many uncomfortable situations, making decisions about difficult passengers, but now she couldn't defend herself. Alex Carter just sat there saying nothing, waiting for the truth to be acknowledged. Rachel Bennett took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the mistake she had just made. She had never been questioned like this before, especially not in front of a full flight of passengers. Alex Carter showed no pride or mockery. He didn't raise his voice or react in any way that could make her uncomfortable. He simply sat there calmly, like a teacher, watching a student struggle to find the right answer. Rachel Bennett tried to regain her composure, realizing that the only way to escape this moment was to do something she had never had to do before: admit her mistake. She adjusted her uniform and forced herself to look directly at Alex. "You're right," she said, her voice softer, no longer maintaining the usual confidence. "I didn't check the system. I made an assumption and treated you unfairly." Some passengers exchanged glances, some surprised that she had actually admitted her fault, while others were less impressed, seeing that it had taken her so long to acknowledge her mistake. Alex Carter simply nodded once, as if he had known the truth all along, but just wanted to hear her say it out loud. Rachel Bennett shifted her body, looking around as the discomfort of the situation began to take over. She wasn't just apologizing to Alex Carter, she was apologizing to an entire flight full of people. She cleared her throat, her voice returning to a more professional tone. "I sincerely apologize, Mr. Carter. I should have verified your ticket instead of assuming there was an error." Alex Carter remained silent, observing her for a long moment, his expression unchanged. Then he stood up. The moment he stood, the atmosphere in the cabin seemed to change. Rachel Bennett exhaled in relief, thinking that he wouldn't escalate the tension further. She quickly stepped aside, signaling for him to follow her back to first class. However, just before passing her, Alex Carter turned back and addressed the passengers who were watching. "It's funny how I was asked to move so quickly," he said, his voice calm and almost indifferent. "But when it's time to fix the mistake, it takes longer." A wave of uncomfortable murmurs spread throughout the economy section. Some passengers nodded, slightly agreeing, while others looked away, feeling uneasy, as the truth was now clear before them. Rachel Bennett didn't respond. She simply turned around and led Alex Carter back to first class. She could feel the eyes of all the passengers following every step she took. Her uniform now felt too tight, as if it were choking her. For the first time in her career, Rachel Bennett realized that this wasn't just about a passenger. It was about how power could be abused. Each step she took felt heavier. She felt as though every eye in the cabin was pressing down on her. No one whispered anymore. The silence now carried more judgment than any words. Could Alex Carter walked behind her, slowly, unhurried, unfazed, as if he had the whole world at his feet. The first-class passengers turned to look when Alex re-entered their section. Their expressions were mixed, some confused and uncomfortable. A few quickly looked away, feigning sudden interest in their books or screens, while others who had witnessed the earlier incident shifted in their seats, clearly watching what was unfolding. Alex returned to his seat, adjusted his bag, and sat down calmly, not once looking at Rachel Bennett, who was still standing next to him. Rachel Bennett swallowed hard, struggling to maintain her professional demeanor even though her heart was racing. This moment lingered, and she knew she had to say something. "If you need anything, Mr. Carter, please let me know," she said, her voice sounding much weaker. Alex slowly turned his head toward her, his gaze still unreadable, and his words hit her like the hardest blow. "You didn't ask me that before," he said, his voice calm, but those words felt like a punch to her stomach. Rachel Bennett blinked, realizing what he was implying. She had treated every first-class passenger with a bright smile, a friendly greeting, serving drinks before takeoff, and making sure they were comfortable. But with Alex Carter, she had gone straight to him, questioned him, and forced him to leave the seat he had rightfully paid for without hesitation. She had spoken to him with suspicion instead of courtesy, and that had completely changed the power dynamic in that cabin. Rachel Bennett kept her steps steady. Her shoulders tense, she didn't let them see her falter, but inside her hands were shaking. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain James Foster placed the flight phone back on its holder. His jaw clenched. He had worked in the aviation industry long enough to know what would happen next. He turned to his colleague, co-pilot Robert Williams, who had been observing everything from the start. "We'll get instructions from the ground control center before we land." Captain Foster said, his tone even, but with a seriousness that his colleague could feel. Robert Williams paused for a moment and asked, "So is she fired?" Captain Foster sighed, not answering immediately. "That's not my decision," he said, "but I can tell you this won't end here." Meanwhile, in first class, Alex Carter sat back in his seat, his hand gently tapping a rhythm on the armrest. He wasn't angry, he wasn't arrogant, he just sat there waiting. Because he knew something that Rachel Bennett didn't. This wasn't over. The real consequences would come when the plane landed. The plane continued to fly smoothly through the sky, but in the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with tension, like a storm was about to hit. Rachel Bennett stood in the galley, leaning against the counter, breathing steadily. She had spent her life learning to control every situation, handling difficult passengers and challenging circumstances, but this was different. She gripped the edge of the counter tightly, replaying what had just happened in her mind. She had to walk through the economy section, the same aisle she had forced Alex Carter to walk down. Every passenger had seen what had happened. The curious glances, the shift in the air. This was clearly not just passengers watching a flight attendant do her job. They were witnessing her do something irreparable. Worse still, they were watching her lose power. A soft voice cut through Rachel Bennett's thoughts. "Are you really that tense?" Lily Parker, a younger flight attendant, stood near the galley door, arms crossed, her eyes fixed on Rachel. Rachel Bennett turned sharply. "I don't need your opinion," she snapped back, but her voice no longer had the sharpness it once did. Lily Parker raised an eyebrow, slightly tilting her head. "I'm just saying you're not as confident as you were 20 minutes ago." Rachel Bennett's jaw tightened, but she didn't want to continue the argument. She had worked incredibly hard to get to where she was making countless right decisions, but now she could feel all that solid ground crumbling beneath her own hands. Lily Parker sighed and shook her head. "You know, if you had treated him like any other first-class passenger, none of this would have happened." Rachel Bennett turned away, her eyes sharp as knives as she looked at Lily Parker. "I didn't do anything wrong." Lily Parker raised an eyebrow. "Really? From where I'm standing, you didn't check his ticket. You humiliated him in front of everyone, and now you have to take him back to first class like he's a student being sent to the principal's office." Rachel Bennett felt a rush of blood to her face, her cheeks burning. "That's not what happened." She tried to argue, but Lily Parker wouldn't let her speak. "You and I both know what's going to happen when the plane lands." Lily Parker continued, her voice growing colder. "You can try not to think about it, but the truth is, you were wrong." A chill ran down Rachel Bennett's spine. She hadn't dared to think about what would happen when the plane landed. Would it be a passenger complaint? A meeting with the supervisor, or even a warning? Or would it be the end of her career? She tried to push the thought out of her mind, refusing to let one passenger destroy everything she had built throughout her career. But deep down, she wasn't sure of anything anymore. Rachel Bennett had always trusted her instincts, believing she had the authority to decide who belonged where. But for the first time in her career, she was the one being judged, and what made it worse was that she was now waiting for a punishment that she couldn't control. Lily Parker, still leaning against the galley door, finally broke the silence. "You should sit down before you faint." Lily Parker spoke softly. Rachel Bennett shot her a glare, but this time there was no strength behind it. She gritted her teeth, straightened her back, and grabbed a tray, trying to get back to work. "I have work to do," she said, her voice hoarse. Lily Parker watched her for a long while, then gave a sarcastic smile. Temporarily, Rachel Bennett pretended not to hear. She had handled difficult passengers, tough directors, arrogant businessmen, and picky clients. She had made tough decisions, maintained order, and moved passengers when necessary. But this time, this wasn't about seating. This was a judgment about who she had assumed didn't deserve to be there, about the man she had publicly humiliated in front of the whole plane. Her hand trembled as she placed a glass of water down. The realization of her mistake was painful. She had humiliated the one person on the flight who could end her career with a single email, and she had done it publicly. Rachel Bennett looked toward the cockpit, wondering if she should go there to explain, to justify herself before the plane landed. But deep inside, she knew no explanation would save her now. Back in first class, Alex Carter sat comfortably in his seat, scrolling through his emails. His assistant had sent a preliminary report as expected. The situation was being noticed, and when the plane landed, this conversation would not just be an uncomfortable exchange, it would be a reckoning. It was being pushed to a higher level, and Alex Carter understood that he knew the aviation industry well, and he knew how to handle situations like this. Rachel Bennett wouldn't just be quietly reassigned to another flight. No, this incident would be reviewed at the highest level, and not just for her, but for the entire crew. This wasn't a simple mistake. It was about all the similar incidents that had happened without consequences. Alex Carter glanced around the first-class cabin, noticing the awkward glances of the passengers. Some had witnessed the incident while others chose to look away, but now they were uncertain of what to do, because they knew who Alex Carter was. He sighed, stretched his fingers, before quickly typing a message. "We'll land in less than an hour. Make sure the ground team is ready." His assistant replied instantly, "They'll be at the gate." Alex Carter's expression didn't change. He wasn't the type to shout or wield power aggressively, but sometimes a gentle lesson carried more weight than anything else. The other flight attendants in the galley had started whispering. Even those who hadn't expressed an opinion before were beginning to feel the shift that was about to happen. One of them, Ben Harris, nudged Lily Parker. "What's going on?" Lily Parker crossed her arms, looking at Rachel Bennett with no sympathy. "She's made a huge mistake." Ben Harris frowned. "Yeah, I saw her move that guy out of first class, but who is he?" Lily Parker smirked dryly. "That's Alex Carter." Ben Harris's eyes widened as he realized the weight of the name. No way she kicked him out of first class. Lily Parker smiled mockingly, but there was no humor in her smile. "Yeah." Ben Harris scratched his head. "She's done for right." Lily Parker sighed. "If she's lucky, she'll just be fired." Ben Harris looked over at Rachel Bennett, who was still standing in the galley pretending to be busy, but everyone could see the truth. She was sweating. "She doesn't see it, does she? She's in big trouble." A few minutes later, the seatbelt sign chimed, and Captain James Foster's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're preparing to land. Please fasten your seatbelts and return your tray tables to their upright positions. We'll be landing shortly." Alex Carter calmly fastened his seatbelt, his expression unchanged, but he checked his phone one last time. A new message had arrived. Security has been notified. The ground team will be at the gate. Rachel Bennett will need to report as soon as we land. Alex Carter gave a small smile, tucked his phone into his pocket, and didn't hurry. He wasn't the type to enjoy seeing others suffer, but he believed in responsibility and justice. And Rachel Bennett, she didn't know the magnitude of the trouble that was waiting for her as soon as the plane touched down. Rachel Bennett had always believed in her own power. The power she could control the authority carried through a strong voice, a firm posture, and a confident gaze. But now she was beginning to realize that true power doesn't need shouting, it doesn't need arguments, it simply waits. And right now, Alex Carter was waiting. Alex Carter sat comfortably, his fingers gently tapping on the armrest. He wasn't in a hurry, he wasn't anxious, he was simply observing, waiting. While the wheels of justice turned slowly but surely, meanwhile Rachel Bennett felt like she was suffocating. She had made mistakes before, everyone did, but she had never felt this way. Never had a mistake been exposed so quickly and so publicly. She swallowed hard, trying to straighten up. She had always been good at handling pressure, but as the plane neared its landing, she wasn't sure if she could withstand what was coming next. For the first time in her career, she no longer had control, and she had a feeling that she would never regain that control again. The plane continued to descend slowly, the engines humming gently, but inside the cabin, everything had changed. Alex Carter kept tapping his fingers on the armrest, his face calm, but his mind sharp. He wasn't the type of person to humiliate others or be unnecessarily cruel, but this wasn't just about him. He had worked in the aviation industry long enough to know that incidents like this happened far too often. Passengers were judged discarded, and most never received justice. But this time was different. He could feel it, not just from the change in altitude, but from the way the entire crew was moving. The flight attendants, those who had always been confident and calm, were now looking at Rachel Bennett with worried eyes. A few had started to distance themselves from her, sensing that something was about to happen. Lily Parker and Ben Harris exchanged quick glances across the aisle, saying nothing but understanding everything. They knew what was going to happen. Rachel Bennett was done. Captain James Foster's voice came over the intercom, still as calm as ever. "Flight attendants, please prepare for landing." Rachel Bennett clenched her fists. She tried to stand tall, maintaining steady breaths, pretending everything was normal, but it was clear it wasn't. In less than 10 minutes, she would step off this plane, not as a respected flight attendant with years of experience, but as a woman stepping straight into a storm. She had to think about what she could do. Would an apology be enough? She had apologized already, and Alex Carter had decided that this wasn't just about whether she kept her job or not. It was about whether she could leave with her reputation intact. And deep down, she knew the answer. The wheels hit the runway with a jolt, and the plane began to decelerate smoothly. The engines rumbled slightly before cutting off, and the plane continued to taxi toward the gate. Around her, passengers sighed in relief, stretched their legs, grabbed their luggage. The hustle and bustle of passengers began, but for Rachel Bennett, nothing about this moment felt ordinary. This wasn't a typical landing. This was the end of something, and she could feel it. Lily Parker stood near the galley door, her eyes saying everything without uttering a word. She didn't need to say anything. Her gaze spoke volumes. Alex Carter stood, straightened. His jacket, glanced at the galley one last time before walking off the plane. He didn't need to say anything. The message had already been delivered. Rachel Bennett swallowed her throat dry, forcing herself to take another step. She knew that beyond that door her fate had already been sealed, and for the first time in her career she was utterly powerless. Her eyes flickered toward the cabin door where 2 security officers and a senior director were waiting outside the glass. They weren't coming because of a disruptive passenger. They weren't coming because of an airport incident. They were coming because of her. She turned to look out the window, knowing there was no other way. She couldn't escape this anymore. Rachel Bennett hadn't yet risen while the other passengers were retrieving their luggage, stretching and chatting politely. She sat still, maintaining her composure, self-restraint, and waiting. She knew why. Because Alex Carter didn't need to rush. He knew what awaited ahead. Rachel Bennett took a deep breath, forcing herself to stand straight, adjust her uniform, and step forward. She had always believed in handling everything professionally, but now she wasn't sure if professionalism still mattered. She inhaled deeply and walked down the aisle. As soon as she did, the tension in the cabin filled the air. Passengers who had previously ignored her now covertly glanced at her as she passed by. Some had witnessed what happened, piecing it together, realizing something had gone wrong, while others simply sensed the change in the atmosphere. Rachel Bennett walked through the economy section, past the very seat where she had forced Alex Carter to sit just hours earlier. Now she herself was the one being forced to do something she couldn't stop. Rachel Bennett approached the cabin door, and at that moment, Alex Carter stood up. He stretched slowly as though he had all the time in the world. With the same calm energy he had maintained throughout the flight, Alex Carter walked down the aisle. The nearby passengers felt the tension, realizing that everything had changed since the plane had taken off. Rachel Bennett reached the exit door first, standing just a few steps away from the airline director and security staff. She felt her heartbeat race in her throat. The director didn't speak immediately, nor did the security personnel. They were waiting for Alex Carter to step out first. And in that moment, Rachel Bennett understood this wasn't just about moving one passenger to economy. This was about removing the wrong person. She heard Alex Carter's footsteps behind her as he approached the door. His presence radiated power without needing to try. Then, for the first time since she had been forced to move him back to first class, he spoke, his voice calm, even, and just quiet enough for only her to hear. Next time, check the ticket before checking the person. No cruelty, no sarcasm, just the truth, a truth she should have realized long ago. Alex Carter walked past her out of the plane, greeted by the airline director, with a handshake and a respectful nod, something she would never receive again. Rachel Bennett kept her gaze forward, feeling the walls of her career closing in. Finally, the airline director spoke. "You're coming with us." She didn't argue, didn't try to defend herself. There was nothing left to say, because for the first time in her life, she understood that she no longer had control, and she would never regain it. Rachel Bennett felt her legs weaken as she descended the plane stairs, each step heavier than the last. The noise of the airport, the distant announcements, the sound of luggage rolling on the floor, the hurried footsteps. Everything seemed muted, almost unreal. She had walked these hallways hundreds of times, always with power, with purpose, with confidence, but now she wasn't walking like a leader, she was walking like a defendant. The airline director, a tall man in a sharp gray suit with a cold expression, walked ahead without looking at her. The security personnel followed behind, silent but impossible to ignore. Clearly, this could not be avoided. Rachel Bennett swallowed her throat dry, struggling to maintain her posture, holding on to the last remnants of her dignity, hoping there was something she could do to make it right. But deep down, she knew the truth. Some mistakes can't be undone. Some choices come with consequences that can't be erased. And this time, she had made one of those mistakes. Rachel Bennett stepped into the meeting room where 3 senior airline executives sat facing her. They were not flight supervisors, nor were they managers, but executives, those who decided who would stay and who would be removed, the ones who determined her future. She took a deep breath and walked in. The door closed behind her, and one of the executives, a middle-aged woman with silver hair and an unreadable expression, folded her hands on the table and spoke, "Ms. Bennett, please take a seat." Rachel Bennett slowly sat down, sitting up straight, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. No one spoke for a moment. Then the silver-haired executive spoke again. "Do you understand why you are here, Miss Bennett?" Her mouth felt dry. She knew anything she said next would determine the rest of her career. She licked her lips, trying to keep her voice steady. There was an issue with the seating arrangement on the flight. The second executive, a tall man with a strong jaw and piercing eyes, raised an eyebrow. An issue with seating. Rachel Bennett tried not to flinch. "Yes," she continued, "a misunderstanding regarding the status of a first-class passenger." The third executive, a dark-skinned man with a stern face, was reviewing the official report and finally looked up. "A misunderstanding." He repeated, "You're calling it a misunderstanding." The room fell silent, and suddenly Rachel Bennett realized they weren't listening to her explanation. They already had enough information. The reports had been submitted, the statements had been collected, her actions had already been scrutinized, and now they were here only to make a decision. She couldn't escape this. The silver-haired executive slid a piece of paper toward her. Her voice was devoid of any warmth, like a judge delivering a sentence. "Effective immediately. You are relieved of your position as head flight attendant." She felt her stomach drop. "Your employment contract with this airline has been terminated." Rachel Bennett choked her hand, gripping the paper on the table. The second executive raised his hand, signaling for her to be silent before she could make excuses. "There is no room for negotiation, no space for debate. The decision has been made." The weight of it pressed down on Rachel Bennett, heavier than she had imagined. She had spent years believing in her power, that her authority was absolute, but now for the first time she truly understood that she no longer had control, and she would never regain it. The second executive spoke again, his voice firm and decisive. "Your actions on Flight 417 were unacceptable. You failed to verify the first-class passenger's ticket. You acted on assumptions and publicly humiliated a man who had every right to sit there." The third executive leaned forward, his gaze unyielding. "And Rachel Bennett, the man you humiliated, was Alex Carter." Those words crushed any remaining hope she had. She had spent a decade making swift judgments, deciding who was worthy and who wasn't, but now for the first time she was the one being judged, and she had been deemed unworthy. Rachel Bennett stared at the termination letter, her eyes stinging. 10 years, a decade in the profession, all gone because of one wrong decision, one single wrong decision. She tried to find something to say, anything that could change the outcome. But there was nothing. No second chance. No room for negotiation. Only the cold responsibility of facing the consequences. The silver-haired executive stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "Security will escort you out." And just like that, it was over. Rachel Bennett slowly rose from her chair, her hand trembling as she picked up the termination letter. The weight of the paper felt heavy, as though it carried all the mistakes she had made on that flight. The security personnel followed her, but they didn't need to pull her along. She didn't resist. She had nothing left to fight against. Rachel Bennett stood on the sidewalk outside the airport's private exit, her hand still clutching the vibrating phone. The screen had gone dark, but she couldn't bring herself to put it down. Couldn't let it go, even though she had called everyone who could help. Every call went unanswered. No one picked up. Her stomach clenched with a cold, sharp pang. They all knew, everyone knew. No one wanted their name attached to hers anymore. The realization hit her like a punch in the stomach. She had spent her entire career deciding the fate of others, and now the very industry she worked in had decided hers. She lowered the phone, staring blankly into the distance, her body feeling numb. For the first time since everything began, she truly understood herself. She saw herself the way others had seen her. Not as a leader, not as an expert, but as someone who had allowed power to cloud her judgment and now had lost it all. She had judged the wrong person, and the price she had to pay was everything. A few meters away, a sleek black car was parked near the private exit. Alex Carter watched her from inside his expression as cold as ever. Lucas Hayes, his assistant, checked his phone and looked up. "She's out." Alex Carter didn't respond immediately, only observing her with an unchanged expression. "She looks lost," Lucas said after a moment. Alex Carter exhaled through his nose. "Does she deserve it?" Lucas hesitated slightly before asking again, "Do you think she'll learn anything?" Alex Carter reclined his head against the back of the seat, staring up at the car ceiling. "I don't know," he replied. "Some people will learn, others won't." Lucas nodded. "Do you think she deserved to be fired?" Alex Carter thought for a moment. He wasn't the type to take pleasure in seeing someone else lose everything, but this wasn't about revenge, it was about responsibility. "I think she deserves to understand what it feels like to be cast aside without a second thought," he said finally, "to be treated like a burden, like she didn't belong there, because she did that to me." Lucas didn't argue. Both of them knew that this wasn't just about one flight attendant. It was about how those in power abused their positions, and today, for the first time, the consequences had fallen on the right person. Rachel Bennett finally moved. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through her contacts. She needed to call someone, an old friend, a former colleague, anyone who could help her. She needed to find a way back into this industry, because without it, she would have nowhere to go. She had built her life around this job, and now she had nothing. She tapped a contact, a former manager she had worked with years ago. She hit dial. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. She swallowed hard and tried another contact. Voicemail. Another voicemail. The coldness spread through her body. They knew everything. No one was going to help her. No one wanted their name associated with hers. Realizing that she felt like she had been knocked down, she had spent her entire career making decisions about others, and now the industry had made a decision about her. She lowered the phone, staring into the empty space. Her body stiffened as, for the first time in her life, she saw herself the way others had seen her. She wasn't a leader. She wasn't an expert. She was someone who had let power cloud her judgment. And now she had nothing. She had judged the wrong person, and the price was everything. Alex Carter watched her from the car. His face unchanged, Lucas sat silently beside him. Finally, Alex spoke, but not to anyone in particular. "Maybe next time she'll think twice before judging someone based on their appearance." Alex Carter closed his eyes, exhaling slowly as the car pulled away from the curb. Because this time, the lesson wasn't for him. It was for her. Rachel Bennett had left the plane with a hard, resolute look, but deep inside, everything felt like it was crumbling. Alex Carter had walked away with all his power and reputation intact. Nothing had changed for him, but for her, she had nothing left. She knew that Alex Carter didn't do this out of revenge, which made it even worse. He hadn't scolded her, hadn't demanded her firing, hadn't been angry. He had simply let her dig her own grave because the moment she refused to check his ticket, the moment she assumed he didn't deserve to sit in first class based on an assumption, she had closed the door to her career. She had done this to herself, and now, for the first time, she had to face the truth she had been avoiding for all these years. She wondered how many others she had treated this way. How many times had she dismissed someone just because of their appearance? How many had been pushed into economy class, forced to endure discomfort and humiliation without any way to fight back? The only difference between them and Alex Carter was that he owned the airline while the others had just silently endured. And now she was the one who had to endure the discomfort of her own decisions. A gust of wind blew against her face, but she barely felt it. She turned back, not because she wanted to, but because she had nowhere else to go. She couldn't go back into the airport and pretend like nothing had happened. She couldn't apply to another airline and hope they hadn't heard about this incident. They had all heard. The aviation world was small, and news spread as fast as wildfire. Even if the story didn't hit the news, the people who needed to know already knew. Every job application she sent would hit an invisible wall. Every reference letter would be ignored. Her name had been tarnished. And the worst part was she had no backup plan. This job had been her whole life. She had never had to think about what she would do if it all fell apart. And now she had to figure out a solution on her own. A few airport staff members passed by, chatting casually, as if nothing had happened. She had walked through that door so many times before, but now she was blocked. She had controlled this world, those flights, the flight attendants, the passengers, a power no one could challenge, but now it was all gone. Her power was gone, her position was gone, and her certainty was gone. She wanted to convince herself that this was unjust, that she had been treated too harshly, that she deserved another chance. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had built her career on quick judgments, and today that judgment had been passed on her. She stepped out of the airport not because she wanted to, but because she had nowhere else to go. Her footsteps grew heavier as she left the airport behind. The sleek, shiny floors of the terminal were now behind her, replaced by the uneven path leading to the far parking lot. The world she had once ruled, the flights, the flight attendants, the passengers, the power no one could challenge, was no more. And for the first time in over a decade, she had nowhere to go. She had once considered the airport her second home, but now it was a place where she no longer belonged. Rachel Bennett had lost everything, standing silently at the bus stop, no longer holding any power, respect, or place to return to. She had once been the only one able to control everything to reign in the world of flights and flight attendants, but now she was just an ordinary person, forgotten by all. For the first time in her career, she realized that the power she had once held was temporary. She had used it to judge others, to decide whether they were worthy. But now, when she herself was being judged, no one was there to protect her. Alex Carter had done what she could never have imagined. He had forced her to face the truth about herself that she had been avoiding for years. He hadn't yelled at her, hadn't demanded her firing, hadn't been angry. He simply let her dig her own grave. And now, as she stood at the bus stop holding a termination letter in her hand, with no one answering her calls, she understood that she had nowhere to go. All she had done were a series of wrong decisions. She had given herself the authority to judge others without thinking things through. And now she was facing the consequences. Everything she had once done to passengers was now being reflected back at her. She recalled the moment she had ordered Alex Carter to sit in economy class without ever checking his ticket, merely judging him by his appearance, and the smug feeling she had when she thought she was right. But now she had to face the silence from everyone, the same silence she had felt when she issued orders to others without any resistance. But she had been wrong, and she couldn't undo that mistake. Rachel Bennett had set herself on the path to failure. In today's world, where assumptions are quickly made from social media to the workplace to daily interactions, we often face judgments based on appearance status or preconceived notions. But this story serves as a wake-up call. It challenges us to think carefully before we act, to treat others with kindness, and to remember that power is only temporary. What remains is our reputation, character, and the impact we leave on those around us. So in your own life, ask yourself, are there moments when you have judged too hastily? Have you ever overlooked someone without giving them a fair chance? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you felt powerless due to someone else's unfair treatment? Let this story remind us that every action has consequences. How we treat others today can shape our future in ways we might not foresee. The story of Rachel Bennett is not unique. It unfolds in many different ways across professions and daily interactions. But the lesson remains the same. Respect must be built from how we treat others, and fairness should never be overlooked. Her downfall was not just the result of one mistake, but a series of choices throughout her life that eventually caught up with her. Thank you for watching until the end of today's video. Rachel Bennett's story is not only a lesson in fairness and respect, but also a powerful reminder of how we treat others in our daily lives. In a society filled with hasty judgments and inaccurate assumptions, showing respect and fairness to one another is crucial. It's not easy to face the consequences of our wrong decisions, but it's these experiences that help us grow and learn to appreciate the true values in life. Rachel is not the only one to go through this challenge. Every day in our daily lives, many people are overlooked or judged wrongly, simply because of superficial factors with no one to stand up for them. So, through this story, remember that how we treat others can also shape how others treat us. Respect and fairness are not privileges for those in power. They are the rights of everyone. Thank you for joining us in following Rachel's journey from a person with power who fell due to wrong decisions to facing consequences she could not foresee. We hope this story helps you reflect deeply on how we treat others and the importance of listening and checking the facts before making any judgments. If you found this story meaningful and want to share this lesson with your friends and family, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming interesting and meaningful videos. Join our community to share inspiring stories and valuable lessons that help us grow and live better every day. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Your feedback is what motivates us to continue bringing you more interesting and insightful content. Thank you once again, and we wish you a wonderful day ahead. Remember, always treat others with respect and fairness, as it will come back to us in the best way possible. See you in the next videos.